Oh, we're in for a good one, boys. We're in for a good one. We have our first April Fool's prank of the night. And it wasn't from anyone I thought it would be from. No siree. No. Every once in a while, somebody is foolish enough someone dares to submit an unban request. And in all my time, I have never seen a bold-faced lie quite so promising and so unlikely as this. But first I need to sell out my Discord, so I have to do that. 'Tis quite rare that such things make me peal with laughter, and yet that is the name of the game tonight. Nevertheless, let me wait for our poor unfortunate souls to show up so that I might read to them this fuckery. Oh. Oh, no. When was this even submitted? It was submitted 3 days ago. Merry Christmas, Sassy. And a Happy New Year. Merry Crisis. Alright, Sassy. Sassy, get a load of this. So, even though everyone gets banned, Twitch has now changed things so that people can submit unban requests, and this one is just precious. This one is truly one for the ages. It reads, "Hello. I'm not sure why I was banned. I guess my account must look like a bot, ... But I love Mahjong Quest, ! I was very happy I found someone who streams it, ! I can show you my score if you want." There's no fucking way. No fucking way that that's true. I refuse to believe that somebody really dragged their ass to Twitch with a username that has dumb in it. Which one was that? It was the ban. I banned them. They're mdumb. MDUMB. And I banned them, March 11th. And I'm getting something now 3 days ago. It can't be serious. It just, I refuse to believe that that's legit. I refuse to believe that that's legit. There's no frigging way that somebody actually searched for Mahjong Quest on Twitch and found me that way. That's bull. You know what Mahjong Quest is. I've been playing it for years on stream. There is nobody who streams it, nobody who's looking for it. It's a meme. It's a meme that I even deigned to stream it. It's always been. Ever since I started streaming in 2017. I almost said 2007. Jesus Christ. People would be, like, laughing at me. They're just like, haha. Nobody grows their community by streaming themselves playing Mahjong Solitaire. And they were completely right. That is not how I grew my community at all. I grew it through networking and other games and luck. There's no way. No way. That's statistically... That's statistically impossible. Seems like a solid strat to me. Well, yeah, because you're already here. I mean, it works really nicely to maintain it once I already have something. But, nah, dude. I mean, even if I did believe it, I wouldn't unban them. Like, even if it were true, which it's not, but even if it were, I still wouldn't unban them, just because I like the way the community is now. They can't talk anyway. I have no desire to get to know this person. Everyone I need is right here. So... what a fucking... That's a real April Fool's joke. They wrote that shit thinking I was gonna believe it. And that friggin' ellipses as well. Nah, dude, that's sketch as fuck. I must look like a bot, ... That's some moony shit. Like, no. They're getting denied. Oh, I can add a note to the user. Ooh. Oh no. We should think about this before we do this. Uh-oh. Oh, Sassy, you're hearing the evil laughter. You're hearing the falcon laughter of, oh, we can cause some friggin' mischief tonight, boys. Ah, no. I gotta be careful. Do I need to be concerned? That's really a philosophical question. No. Boomy wouldn't let us do something dumb. Not in that vein, anyway. I think I'm just gonna write no thank you. Period. Yeah. No thank you. Now I just hear Falcon in the back being like, throw in a smiley face at the end. And we're like, bruh. Come on, man. Oh, it's so tempting. No, we're just gonna write no thank you. We're gonna be a good wolfie. Hit send. Don't. Alright, I sent it. We're good. Oh. That was too funny, though. That was too funny. Amazing. I'm glad that was saved for posterity. That was truly... That was truly one for the ages. So... What an opener. Right? I couldn't write better content than that. What a joke. Like... What a joke. Gonna flee to the bathroom real quick? Not a problem. I'm still waiting for more people. I have something that I wrote in the dead of night, last night that I'm super eager to share with you guys. Damn, the banning starts immediately. Oh my god. They seriously waited 3 weeks to tell me this story that they expected me to believe. Well, not 3 weeks. No, 3 weeks. Yeah, just about 3 weeks. I banned them, like, the 11th of March. It's the 1st of April. And they come back with this story that they've been looking for a Mahjong Quest streamer. Bruh, how much weed do they think I smoke? How many brain cells do they think they killed? I may have been too stupid for a lot of shit. But I ain't in a PhD program for nothing. Mama didn't raise no moron. Fucking hell. Thanks for the laugh, though. I appreciate that. I'm dumb. I'm dumb indeed. Thank you. Very funny. Merry Christmas to you. Jeez. That one's my favorite. Of all of the unbanned requests I've had since the unbanned requests became a thing, I think that one's my favorite. We don't do unbanning. Once you're banned, you're banned. But, like, it's funny to watch you try. This place is a fortress. We have the chat on 3 months follower mode. And the first time we see you in the viewer list, you're already banned. So, like, if you want to join this community, you're a few years late. Unless you got connections, and even then. An exception would be made for Tenchi. But outside I am. Fuck out of here. Mr. Banhammer, damn it. Nah, don't worry, there'll be others. There'll be others. I love how trigger happy I've made my mods. Y'all are like friggin' hounds barking and trying to chase all the rabbits. It's great. I love it. It's so satisfying. Nah, don't worry, don't worry. There'll be more. It's like a competitive sport for y'all. I should really have like a tally. Like, you know those charts you have in like kindergarten? Where it's just like, who did the most like classroom chores? Like, who opened the door? Who cleaned the floor? Who, I don't know, sorted the crayons? And they have like the little stars and you can like win prizes. You should have that with the number of people y'all band. It would be, I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to tally. One day you'll be as good as Edge. I believe in you. Where is everybody? I'll give them a few more minutes. I'll give them until 45. But Sassy, I have a treat special for you. I wrote it last night at like 11:30. And it's an idea that's just been like bouncing around in my head for a while. And then last night I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna just write it. I'm like, oh yeah, you'll appreciate this one. I was thinking of you a bit when I was writing it too. You'll like it, trust me. Edgehead also sent something in for me to read. Not getting any activity on Discord, so I think people are just grabbing their water. No, you didn't miss anything, Edgehead. Speak of the devil. I literally just mentioned you. You did miss a story, but you did not miss the story. No. So, the first story, and the only story I've told so far, is one I did not even intend to tell. So, I get unban requests. Not often. Not often. But, you know, occasionally. And there was this dude that I banned March 11th. 3 days ago. I get an unban request. So, it's been banned like better part of 3 weeks at least. Dude wanted me to believe that he was looking for a streamer that plays Mahjong Quest. No. 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 Statistically impossible. No. You can rewatch Survive to hear everything in verbatim, but the only people who are here for the biceps are the people who are very much already here. I mean, there's a very slight chance that it's true. I wouldn't risk it. No, not at all. And something about the writing style, like, and this is probably Boomy being paranoid, but like, it's getting Mooney vibes, and those are not good vibes. I was pretty damn excited when I saw the VOD for Zuma. Okay, that's fair. And I probably would have been too. And honestly, I can bring that back as a lazy game. because I do play it idly. I want to see how far I can get up into Sun God. Because I still have the game. I have a whole bunch of old games. A lot of them I don't stream because I don't know if Twitch would be cool with me streaming them because they're old. And some of them took a bit of magic to get running again. But I would gladly do that again. Meanwhile, the guy that showed up for World of Horror is still here. Okay, yeah, but World of Horror came out relatively recently. Was super popular for a time in 2020, at least. Maybe even late 2019. I think 2020. I'm pretty sure 2020. Like, there was a following for that game, you know? Mahjong, okay. Alright, little history lesson, yeah? Alright. Mahjong Quest game. Mahjong Quest. Alright, when did this game come out? Definitely a bit more engaging. Oh yeah. Like, there's decisions and stuff. Okay. So, favorite time. Usually... I didn't even realize there was a mahjong.com. Oh, it's just a... Okay, no, that's not it. Okay, so... Mahjong Quest. I win. Okay. It doesn't even say when it came out. Mahjong Quest release date, I win. Alright. Well, I could tell you, release date was in 2009. When was Steam? When did Steam come out? Steam. Oh, 2003. Okay, so then it probably actually did come out in 2009. But the point stands. Shit came out in 2009. You feel like it's almost 20 years old. Are you talking about those that think World of Horror is more engaging must not know about the quest or the biceps? I mean, fair. I think I do quite a bit to make it fun for chat. Especially since I'm playing competitive. Apologies for the disrespect for the quest and biceps. I love you guys. Oh, you guys are great. But like, you can understand, certainly. Apologies, but alright. There's something I want to start with, and then I'm going to read Edgehead's story. How's that? I'm gonna tell you the title of this thing at the end. I wrote this last night. Alright. Here we go. There was once a stately raven, it was Bob if you would name him, and he stayed long with his master in a cozy little home. But this Bob he loved exploring,
and his master so adoring, on this night was somewhat boring, snoring over some old tome. Now for escapade, Bob figured, soaring on the wind to Rome, just a while, and then back home. Now Bob's master, his dear feeder, was a kind and avid reader, and taught Bob by the white cedar words he'd never heard before, over many tasty lunches, with good peanuts for the munches, the most satisfying crunches any corvid could ask for. Master taught him funny noises every day a little more, words alone, without the lore. The brisk early winter weather set a chill through Bob's slack feathers. He began to miss the leather of his master's couch and sigh. Soon enough he saw some lamplight through this window in this dark night, and despising threat of frostbite, Bob considered saying hi. So he perched before the curtains by the window of the sky, and tapped gently, hardly shy. From inside that chamber dreary, this dude pondered weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. He was startled by Bob's tapping, as he was very nearly napping, and at once began this yapping at his chamber door, leaving poor cold Bob quite puzzled why such bluster was called for, politely tapping just once more. Shivering, Bob was quite uncertain that the rustling purple curtain would admit his humble entry to this strange but warmer space, when suddenly the shutter flung open, with much a flutter, and without a single mutter, Bob gladly rushed into the place, found a comfy perch above a statue's solemn face, and there settled, full of grace. The madman watched, shocked for a while, then his lips turned in a smile, and with style began talking to the corvid sat on high. All the sounds that he was making, though his legs were surely quaking, there couldn't be mistaking that man wanted some reply. So Bob racked his mind for words his host he'd not defy. "Nevermore," Bob croaked. It was worth a try. Now this man was promptly noiseless. All was in the chamber joyless, as Bob fidgeted and preened, worried that his word was a suck. As for all his master's teaching and the snacks as he was preaching, and Bob's intellect far-reaching, definitions never stuck. So for Bob it was a mystery why this crazy man was struck. But a warm perch was good luck. Bob again the word repeated, staying cozily seated, as the wild man retreated from him and the chamber door, and the fellow seemed to panic and became truly quite manic, and before the bird Melanic railed on and on about Lenore, which Bob quickly realized wasn't a word he knew before, but sounded quite like nevermore. Pleased by rhyme discovered, thinking his host quite recovered, and forgetting the snow-covered wintry mess that led him o'er, Bob decided replication of the word would bring elation from his lofty station on the head of palace by the door, and more frantic and dramatic became his host upon the floor. So Bob repeated, to watch more. Now at length his poor host fainted, his cheeks pale, white as if painted. Bob then found his fun quite tainted, and flew from the scene alone. Through the cold wind brisk and biting, and the wintry bluster fighting, Bob had quick determined flighting back to master's happy home, for he sorely missed his master, even if he liked to roam. So Bob returned to master's home. Unaware was Bob completely that this tale had become neatly such a famous poem sweetly recalled by many men of yore, though the host in his confusion had arrived at the conclusion that Bob's once nightly intrusion never quit his chamber door, and his soul from out Bob's shadow still lies floating on this floor, to be lifted nevermore. And the title of the poem is called Quoth Bob. It's a first draft. I can tighten it up a little bit, but I thought it was funny. I loved that. That was magnificent. I have a history of doing things like this. Not usually this lighthearted. For an English class in college, I was given, like, one of the final projects for the semester was just like, oh, come up with a creative project inspired by something that we read this semester. It was an English class. I just took it for the credit. And we had read Paradise Lost, and I took issue that the poor snake was just kind of hijacked and then got blamed for everything. So I wrote a really violent tragedy from the perspective of the snake. And I went a little overboard. I wrote 40 pages in 3 days. But I wrote also chapter summaries. So I gave my professor the whole thing and said, hey, here's the chapter summaries. Those are of a reasonable length of like 3 pages. But if you want, you can read the full version here. But you don't have to grade it. And she read the whole thing, and she really liked it, and she said, oh, you should get this published, and then I never did. So I have, like, a history of taking well-known literature and being like, let's do this from the perspective of the animal. So it just dawned on me a few days ago, like, hey, what if we did a raven story from the perspective of the raven? But yeah, Edge has been waiting ever so patiently for this story. I'm going to duplicate this such that, yes, I know. Link this over here. Alright. So. This is from Edge. This one's called The Destruction of the Maw. All-encompassing brilliance. I'm gonna make the text bigger. In the village of Harwell, near the square and the slight opening, the elder sat zenfully atop a stump, contemplating the day's work his people had completed as the sun began to settle behind the treetops. As he rested, the children of the neighborhood rushed past him, all giggling and playing with sticks, as if to fence. No real form involved in their wild swinging, mind you. Just a smattering of sounds of dried wood clanging together in the excitement that the youth bring. Easy now, little ones. You ought not to play so violently. And isn't it a bit late to be getting so wild? He spoke in a calm but firm and wise tone, an ease of speech that calmed the children, if only a little. The swinging stopped, but the elation persisted, and as the as the fake swords clattered to the ground, a young group gathered round the elder. How can you say such things when today is the day of the reading? One interjected energetically. Yeah, we're about to hear the traditional story of Harwell again. It's cause for rejoice, another piped up. The elder knew this, and smiled, for the reading of the story of Harwell was always his favorite event. The reading of the story of Harwell was always his favorite event. That's not a hard sentence to say, I just suck at speaking. Every year, the village elder recites the story to the gathered masses. And after the passing of his father, this year would be his first reading. A nervous energy came over him, but he quickly stifled it and bared a wide smile for them.
Oh, I know it is cause for rejoice. I hope I can do the reading justice as my father did.
The biggest child, around 13 years old, stepped forward and gently grabbed the elder's hand, smirking. I'm sure you will, Elder Stefan. Of that I'm sure. His words and gesture bringing a slight tear to the elder's eye.
Thank you, my child. But off with you all. We must wash up before the reading. We must look our finest.
Elder Stefan waggled the index finger of his free hand at the children in mock threat, and they giggled at his jest and scattered, returning to their various homes around the village to prepare.
The reading, eh?
I forgot how much I missed this. A voice spoke up from behind the elder, and he looked over his shoulder to see his own son walking over, warmly looking upon his father. It's a shame the Pop-Pop couldn't read it one more time. Oh, all the singing and clapping. The elder's face grew a bit morose, and for a moment he thought back to when his father had read the story. How much fun they'd had as children. And even as adults, getting the kids involved and all hunkering down to listen to the story of Harwell together in perfect harmony. And at the end of the night, snuffing the fires as all in the village prepared for the night. He could only hope that his version were half as good as his dear father's. And Dad, don't worry though. I'm sure your reading will be just as enjoyable. It'll just have a different spice to it. It's the same recipe and it'll taste just as sweet. The elder son walked up and knelt down to his father, placing his hands on his knees and meeting eye level with the older man, grinning and winking, somehow reassuring this old man. You should bundle up though, Dad. It's chilly and you're not exactly a spring chicken. Stefan smiled.
Good call, son. Although we will be by the hot springs while I read, so you might want to dress to swim.
The elder son laughed, and the elder gave a hearty guffaw at his own joke. The weather was a bit too cool to be swimming, even in the springs, and both of the men knew that. Will Mama be at the reading? The elder nodded. Good. I know she took Pop-Pop's passing pretty hard, so I'm glad she decided to come. Well, let me get cleaned up and ready. This only comes once a year, gotta look my best. The elder son winked at his father again and stood back up, patting the old man on the shoulder as he walked past to head home. And once again the elder was alone. Taking in one big breath and standing off the stump, Elder Stefan began the short trek to his own abode, taking care to avoid the icy paths that currently wound around each humble home. Beyond kicking one slightly bigger rock that hurt his foot a little, he arrived home without incident. The old man walked into his room and grabbed the ceremonial headdress, a small hood with jagged black spikes atop it, and gently placed it on his head. After, he reached out and obtained a black cloak next to it, flinging it over his shoulders and tying small yarn bits around his neck loosely. Ah, now we're ready to begin, he thought to himself. Just need to grab the book. And just like magic, or just like if he had said all these things out, there was, in all its glory. It was a dark blue book, adorned with lighter blue circles on it and the likeness of the 3 previous elders engraved into it, along with his own likeness in the very middle. He was never comfortable with that and thought he should have been behind his father, but his father made the decision and he wasn't one to argue. The elder gave a big sigh, thinking about the other elders on the book cover, wondering if he would ever do them proud.
Only one way to find out, he thought.
He gripped the book by the spine and tucked it under his arm, the weight slightly lighter than he expected. He began making his way out of the house and toward the big hot spring at the edge of town. Being careful yet again to avoid any slick areas of the ground, and with the excited villagers rushing in the area all around him. All very anxious to hear the new elder's telling of the story of Harlow. And despite his age, the elder made quick work of the trip to the springs. Walking over the small sticks into the spring, the elder made his way to the gigantic, mostly flat stone inhabiting the traditional reading spot. He walked around it to the low side on it and climbed up onto the top of it, approaching the wooden stand placed at the front of the stone. Raising a hand to calm the rowdy crowd, he placed the book onto the stand, opening the book to the story of Harwell, the well-worn pages of the storybook feeling like silk between his weathered fingers. With everyone's attention, with the clearing of his throat, he began to recite the story of Harwell.
Somebody once told me the world is going to roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kind of dumb, with her finger and her thumb in the shape of an L on her forehead.
Oh, oh, that was good. Now I'm getting pictures of Smash Mouth. Please, 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 just go. I hate the Shermans. Well, they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. Back to the rules when we hit the ground running. Oh. Oh, that was good. You know what? Well fucking done. Well fucking done. I did not see it. Stephen Harwell! Oh! Oh! Oh no! I'm stupid! Steve Harwell. Oh, yep, there it is. I needed to scroll down. Oh, man. They don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming. I love how this has become just a shitpost stream. Oh, man. I'm trying to think of if I have any shitpost things that I've read or written. The book cover is a single cover for the song. The ceremonial outfit is what he looks like in this video. Oh. Oh my god, I see it now. The spikes of the hair. Yeah. Yup. Oh, that is so well done. Thank you for that, Edgehead. That was amazing. I got really into it, too. It's so terrible. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was the flame ship. Oh, man.
I'm trying to think. I don't write a lot of funny things. I'm not very funny.
Tenchi was. Tenchi could make anything into a 5-star good. Oh, that was so good.
I'm trying to think. Do I have any material?
I could always just pull up the script to B-movie, but I feel like that's so overdone.
I'm thinking.
I know Chaos was working on something, but he may not have gotten the time. And he didn't send it to me, so I don't know.
I'm trying to think if I even have anything in my library.
I do know. Ayy, well shot, Sassy. Well shot. I was right, there was more. There's always more. There's always more. Oh, what else? There's gotta be more. Sassy's a real sharpshooter. That's what I said, and she's just like, no, I must improve. I'm like, you're pretty top tier. I don't know what you're on about. Alright, let me go through my entire library and see if I have anything. Maybe I shouldn't select the building. I have Dostoevsky. That's pretty scary. Gosh, I'm so serious. I require more power. Chat, what should we do? Where can I find the shitpost things? Maybe not, because that comes with responsibility. I mean, here you can be the lord of the kingdom, because there's not really much here. We don't mind. Uncle Ben would be proud. Let me see. Trying to Spooderman. Ayy. Hold on, I'm a-thinking. I gotta have something. It's probably in Stories and Tales. What can I make jokes out of?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I'm so stumped. I could read to you about crystals. I don't know why I have this in my library. My existence. Let's look at cross-cultural lore. So, American myths, legends, and tall tales. About what? Yeah, that's folklore. Let's do... Hold on, I'm thinking. I don't know the lore of April Fools. I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. I have textbooks on so many things. Studies in parapsychology. That's not gonna be funny. If I read anything from the Wicca folder, I'm just gonna be making fun of it. And that could be offensive, so I'm not gonna do that. Shit. I don't have funny material. How did I... Well, hold on. Didn't I just... Poetry and classical... Alright, so... How would y'all feel if I read to you murder mysteries from ancient China? No, that's pretty much on beat for what we do here. God damn it. I mean, would you still like it, though? I don't know. I'm here for y'all. A whoa? Okay. Alright, I just need to go to my bookcase and actually get it. Alright, yeah, I've got a book of short stories. I'm not gonna give you, like, the whole novel ones, because that's a bit much, but... God, I destroyed everything. You're down for anything? Let me actually generate content. Oh, God's forbid I actually do my job. Alright, chat, you wanna hear about something fucking niche? 6.5 thousand words of your story, I'm here for whatever else. Oh, sweet. Alright. Y'all wanna see some obscure shit? Oh, shit. Wow, you shot that person before I even saw them. Well done, Sassy. So there was a dude named Robert Van Gulick, who, I forget if he was a diplomat or an ambassador to China or something, but he found these stories about a judge in the Tang Dynasty called Judge Di, or Di Renjie. And he wrote a bunch of short stories, sort of based off of some of his stuff. Oh my god, I read the illustration list and had a small heart attack. Okay. No, we're good. We're good. Alright. So this story I'm going to read to you is called He Came with the Rain. It's on page 44. Hear that, chat? It's a physical book. He came with the rain. Oh. Select everything up. Okay, there we go. The scene of this third story, it's the third in the book, is also laid in Penrai, about half a year later. Oh, in the meantime, Judge Dee's 2 wives and their children, it was normal for magistrates to have multiple wives, so that's like, not sketch. And their children arrived in Penrai and settled down in the magistrate's private residence at the back of the tribunal compound. Shortly afterwards, Cao joined the household. Okay. When Judge Dee's first lady met Miss Cao, she took an instant liking to her and engaged her as her lady companion. Then, on one of the hottest, rainiest days of midsummer, there occurred a strange case related in the present story.
Oh, this box won't do either.
Judge Dee's... Oh, whoops. Read that wrong. The best kind had a satisfying smell of computer screen. Oh yeah, for sure. Ah, this box won't do either. Judge Dee's first lady remarked disgustedly. Look at the gray mold all along the seam of this blue dress. She slammed the lid on the red leather clothes box shut, then turned to the second lady. I've never known such a hot, damp summer, and the heavy downpour we had last night. I thought the rain would never stop. Give me a hand, will you? The judge, seated at the tea table by the open window of the large bedroom, looked on while his 2 wives put the clothes box on the floor, and went on to the third one in the pile. Miss Cao. Oh, I lost my place. I gotta hold this thing down. I gotta hold this book down, because it keeps wanting to close on me. It's not good. Oh, actually, I'm doing this all wrong. Haha, here we go. Miss Cao, his first lady's friend and companion, was drying robes on the brass brazier in the corner, draping them over the copper wire cover above the glowing coals. The heat of the brazier, together with the stream curling up from the drying clothes, made the atmosphere of the room nearly unbearable. But the 3 women seemed unaware of it. With a sigh, he turned round and looked outside. In the bedroom here on the 2nd floor of his residence, one usually had a fine view of the curved roofs of the city. But now everything was shrouded in a thick leaden mist that blotted out all the contours. The mist seemed to have entered his very blood, pulsing dully in his veins. Now he deeply regretted the unfortunate impulse that, on rising, had made him ask for his gray summer robe. That request had brought his first lady to inspect the 4 clothes boxes, and finding mold on the garments, she had once summoned his second and Miss Cao, rather. Now the 3 were completely engrossed in their work, with apparently no thought of morning tea, let alone breakfast. And this was their first experience of the dog days in Penrai, for it was just 7 months since he had taken up his post of magistrate there. He stretched his legs, for his knees and feet felt swollen and heavy. Miss Cao stooped and took a white dress from the brazier. This one's completely dry, she announced. As she reached up to hang it on the clothes rack, the judge noticed her slender, shapely body. Suddenly, he asked the First Lady sharply, "Can't you leave all that to the maids?" "No, of course," his first replied over her shoulder. "But I first want to see for myself whether there's any real damage. For heaven's sake, look at this red robe here." She went on to Miss Tsao. "The mold is absolutely into the fabric. And you always say this dress looks so well on me." Judge D rose abruptly. The smell of perfume and stale cosmetics mingling with the faint odor of damp clothes gave the hot room an atmosphere of overwhelming femininity that suddenly jarred on his taut nerves.
"I'm just going out for a short walk,"
he said. "Before you've even had your morning tea!" his first wife exclaimed. But her eyes were on the discolored patches of the red dress in her hands.
"I'll be back for breakfast," muttered the judge. "Give me the blue robe over there."
Miss Tsao helped the second put the robe over her shoulders and asked solicitously,
These books were written in like the 1950s, by the way.
"Isn't that dress a bit too heavy for this hot weather?" "It's dry, at least," he said curtly. At the same time, he realized with dismay that Miss Tsao was perfectly right. The thick fabric clung to his moist back like a coat of mail. He mumbled a greeting and went downstairs. They quickly walked down the semi-dark corridor leading to the back door of the tribunal compound. He was glad his old friend and advisor, Sergeant Fung, had not yet appeared. The sergeant knew him so well that he would sense at once that he was in a bad temper and wouldn't wonder what it was all about. Oh, and he would wonder what it was all about. The judge opened the back door with his private key and slipped out into the wet, deserted street. What was it all about, really? He asked to himself as he walked along the dripping mist. Well, these 7 months of his first independent official post had been disappointing, of course. Hold on. There we go. The first few days had been exciting, and then there had been the murder of Miss Hull and the case at the fort. But thereafter had been nothing but dreary office routine, forms to be filled out, papers to be filed, licenses to be issued. In the capital, he had also had much paperwork to do, but unimportant papers. Moreover, this district was not really his. The entire region from the river north was a strategic area, under the jurisdiction of the army. And the Korean quarter outside the East Gate had its own administration. He angrily kicked a stone and then cursed. What had looked like a loose boulder was in fact the top of a cobblestone, and he hurt his toe badly. He must make a decision about Miss Tsao. The night before, in the intimacy of their shared couch, his first lady had again urged him to take Miss Tsao as his third. She and his second wife were fond of her, she had said, and Miss Tsao herself wanted nothing better. Besides, his first had added with her customary frankness, your second is a fine woman, but she hasn't had a higher education, and to have an intelligent, well-read girl like Miss Tsao around would make life much more interesting for all concerned. But what if Miss Tsao's willingness was motivated only by gratitude for him, for getting her out of the terrible trouble she'd been in? In a way, it would be easier if he didn't like her so much. On the other hand, would it then be fair to marry a woman one didn't really like? As a magistrate, he was entitled to as many as 4 wives, but personally he held the view that 2 wives ought to be sufficient unless both of them proved barren. This was all very difficult and confusing. He pulled his robe closer around him, for it had begun to rain. He sighed with relief when he saw the broad steps leading up to the Temple of Confucius. The 3rd floor of the West Tower had been converted into a small tea house. He would have his morning tea there, then walk back to the tribunal. In a low-ceilinged, octagonal room, a slovenly dressed waiter was leaning on the counter, stirring the fire of the small tea stove with iron tongs. Judge D noticed with satisfaction that the youngster didn't recognize him, for he was not in the mood to acknowledge bowing and scraping. He ordered a pot of tea and a dry towel and sat down at the bamboo table in front of the counter. The waiter handed him a none-too-clean towel and a bamboo basket. "Just one moment, please, sir. The water will be boiling soon." As the judge rubbed his long beard dry with the towel, the waiter went on. "Since you are up so early, sir, you'll have heard already about the trouble out there." He pointed with his thumb at the open window, and as the judge shook his head, he continued with relish. "Last night, a fellow was hacked to pieces in the Hold watchtower, out there in the marsh." Judge D quickly put the towel down. "A murder? How do you know?" "The grocery boy told me, sir. Came up here to deliver his stuff while I was scrubbing the floor. At dawn, he'd gone to the watchtower to collect duck eggs from that half-witted girl who lives up there, and he saw the mess. The girl was sitting crying in the corner. Rushing back to town, he warned the military police, the blockhouse, and the captain went to the old tower with a few of his men. Look, there they are." Judge D got up and went to the window. From this vantage point, he could see beyond the crenellated top of the city wall and the vast green expanse of the marshlands overgrown with reeds. And further on to the north, in the misty distance, the grey water of the river. A hardened road went from the quay north of the city straight to the lonely tower of weather-beaten bricks in the middle of the marsh. A few soldiers with spiked helmets came marching down the road to the blockhouse halfway between the tower and the quay. "Was the murdered man a soldier?" the judge asked quickly. Although the area north of the city came under the jurisdiction of the army, any crime involving civilians there had to be referred to the tribunal. Could be. That half-witted girl is deaf and dumb, but not too bad-looking. Could be a soldier went up to the tower for a private conversation with her, if you get what I mean. The water's boiling. Judge D strained his eyes. Now 2 military policemen were riding from the blockhouse to the city, their horses splashing through the water that had submerged part of the raised road. "Here's your tea, sir. Be careful, the cup is very hot. I put it here on the still for you. No, come to think of it, the murdered man was no soldier. The grocery boy said he was an old merchant living in the North Gate. Knew him by sight. Well, the military police will catch the murderer soon enough. Plenty tough they are." He nudged the judge excitedly. "There you are. Didn't I tell you they were tough? See that fellow in chains they're dragging from the blockhouse? He's wearing a fisherman's brown jacket and trousers. Well, they'll take him to the fort now, and—" "They'll do nothing of the sort," the judge interrupted angrily. He hastily took a sip of the tea and scalded his mouth. He paid and rushed downstairs. A civilian murdered by another civilian. That was clearly a case for the tribunal. This was a splendid occasion to tell the military exactly where they got off, once and for all. All his apathy had been dropped away from him. He rented a horse from the blacksmith on the corner, jumped into the saddle, and rode to the north gate. The guards cast an astonished look at the disheveled horseman, with the wet house cap sagging on his head. But then they recognized their magistrate and sprang to attention. The judge dismounted and motioned the corporal to follow him into the guardhouse beside the gate. "What's all this commotion about out in the marsh?" he asked. "A man was found murdered in the old tower, sir. The military police have arrested the murderer already. They're questioning him now in the blockhouse. I expect they'll come down to the quay presently." Judge D sat down on the bamboo bench and handed the corporal a few coppers. "Tell one of your men to buy me 2 oil cakes." The oil cakes came fresh from the girdle, and the street vendor had an appetizing smell of garlic and onions. But the judge did not enjoy them, hungry as he was. The hot tea had burned his tongue, and his mind was concentrated with the abuse of power by the army authorities. He reflected ruefully that in the capital one didn't have such annoying problems to cope with. There, detailed rules fixed the exact extent of the authority of every official, high and low. As he was finishing his oil cakes, the corporal came in. The military police have now taken the prisoner into their watch post on the quay, sir. Judge D sprang up. Follow me with 4 men. On the river quay, a slight breeze was dispersing the mist. The judge's robe clung wetly to his shoulders. Exactly a kind of weather for catching a bad cold, he muttered. A heavy-armed sentry ushered him into the bare waiting room at the watch post. In the back, a tall man wearing a coat of mail and a spiked helmet of the military police was sitting behind a roughly made wooden desk. He was filling out an official form with laborious, slow strokes of his writing brush. I am Magistrate D, the judge began. I demand to know. He suddenly broke off. The captain had looked up. His face was marked by a terrible white scar running along his left cheek and across his mouth. His misshapen lips were half concealed by a ragged mustache. Before the judge had recovered from the shock, the captain had risen. He saluted smartly and said in a clipped voice, Glad you came, sir. I've just finished my report to you. Pointing at the stretcher covered with a blanket on the floor in the corner, he added, That's the dead body, and the murderer is in the back room there. You want him taken directly to the jail of the tribunal, I suppose? Yes, certainly, Judge D replied, rather lamely. Good. The captain folded the sheet he had been writing on and handed it to the judge. Sit down, sir. If you have a moment to spare, I'd like to tell you myself about the case. Judge D took a seat by the desk and motioned to the captain to sit down too. Stroking his long beard, he said to himself that all this was turning out quite differently from what he had expected. Well, the captain began, I know the marshland as well as the palm of my hand. That deaf-mute girl who lives in the tower is a harmless idiot, so when it was reported that a murdered man was lying up in her room, I thought at once of assault and robbery, and sent my men to search the marshland between the tower and the riverbank. Why especially that area? The judge interrupted. It could just as well have happened on the road, couldn't it? The murderer hiding the dead body later in the tower? No, sir. Our blockhouse is located on the road halfway between the quay here and the old tower. From there, my men keep an eye on the road all day long, as per orders, to prevent Korean spies from entering or leaving the city, you see. And they patrol that road at night. That road is the only means of crossing the marsh, by the way. It's tricky country, and anyone trying to cross it would risk getting into a swamp or quicksand or would drown. Now, my men found the body was still warm, and we concluded he was killed a few hours before dawn. Since no one passed the blockhouse except the grocery boy, it follows that both the murdered man and the criminal came from the north. The pathway leads through the reeds from the tower to the riverbank, and a fellow familiar with the layout could slip by there without any of my men in the blockhouse spotting him. The captain stroked his mustache and added, If he had succeeded in getting by our river patrols, that is. And your men caught the murderer by the waterside? Yes, sir. They discovered a young fisherman, Wang Sanglang, his name is, hiding in a small boat among the rushes, directly north of the tower. He was trying to wash his trousers, which were stained in blood. When my men hailed him, he pushed off and tried to paddle his boat into the midstream. The archer shot a few string arrows into the hull, and before he knew where he was being hauled back to shore, boat and all. He disclaimed all knowledge of any dead men in the tower, maintained he was on his way there to bring the deaf-mute girl a large carp, and that he got blood on his trousers while cleaning that carp. He was waiting for Dawn to visit her. We searched him, and we found this in his belt. The captain unwrapped a small paper package on his desk and showed the judge 3 shining silver pieces. We identified the corpse by the visiting cards we found on it. He shook the contents of a large envelope out on the table. Besides a package of cards, there were 2 keys, some small change, and a pawn ticket. Pointing at the ticket, the captain continued. That scrap of paper was lying on the floor, close to the body. It must have dropped out of his jacket. The murdered man is the pawnbroker Chung, the owner of a large and well-known pawn shop, just inside the north gate. Wealthy man. His hobby is fishing. My theory is that Chung met Wang somewhere in the quay last night and hired him to take him out on his boat for a night of fishing on the river. When they got to a deserted area north of the tower, Wang lured the old man there under some pretext or other and killed him. He planned to hide the body somewhere in the tower. The thing is half in ruins, you know. The girl uses only the second story, but she woke up and caught him in the act, so he just took the silver and left. This is only a theory, mind you, for the girl is worthless as a witness. My men tried to get something out of her, but she only scribbled down some incoherent nonsense about rain spirits and black goblins. Then she had a fit, began to laugh and to cry at the same time. Poor harmless half-wit. He rose, walked over to the stretcher and lifted the blanket. Here's the dead body. Judge D bent over the lean shape, which was clad in a simple brown robe. The breasts showed patches of clotted blood, and the sleeves were covered with dried mud. The face had a peaceful look, but it was very ugly. Lantern-shaped, with a beaked nose that was slightly askew, and thin-lipped, with too large mouth. The head, with its long graying hair, was bare. Not a very handsome gentleman, the captain remarked. Though, I should be the last to pass such a remark. A spasm contorted his mutilated face. Okay, good, I didn't miss anything in chat. Sorry, it had been a while since I looked up from the book. I really enjoy these mysteries. I really like this author. It's a shame he's been dead for like 60 years. Alright. A spasm contorted his mutilated face. He raised the body's shoulders and showed the judge a large red stain on the back. Killed by a knife thrust from behind that must have penetrated right into his heart. He was lying on his back on the floor, just inside the doors of the girl's room. The captain let the upper part of the body drop. Nasty fellow, that fisherman. After he'd murdered Chung, he began to cut up his breast and belly. I'd say after he killed him, for as you see, those wounds in front haven't bled as much as one would expect. Ah yes, here's my last exhibit. Had nearly forgotten it. He pulled out a drawer in the desk and unwrapped an oiled paper of an oblong package. Handing the judge a long thin knife, he said, "This was found in Wang's boat, sir. He says he uses it for cleaning fish. There's no trace of blood on it. Why should there be? There's plenty of water all around to wash it clean after he got back to the boat. Well, that's about it, sir. I expect that Wang will confess readily enough. I know that type of hoodlum. They begin by stoutly denying everything, but after thorough interrogation, they break down and they talk their mouths off. What are your orders, sir?"
"First, I must inform the next of kin, and have them formally identify the body. Therefore,
I've attended to all that, sir. Chung was a widower, and his 2 sons are living in the capital. The body was officially identified just now by Mr. Lin, the dead man's partner, who lived together with him."
"You and your men did an excellent job," the judge said. "Tell your men to transfer the prisoner and the dead body to the guards I brought with me." Rising, he added, "I really am most grateful for your swift and efficient action, Captain. This being a civilian case, you only needed to report the murder to the tribunal, and you could have left it at that. You went out of the way to help me, and—"
The captain raised his hand in a deprecatory gesture and said in his strange, dull voice, "It was a pleasure, sir. I happen to be one of Colonel Meng's men. We shall always do all we can to help you. All of us, always." The spasm that distorted his misshapen face had to be a smile. Judge D walked to the back of the guardhouse at the north gate. He decided to question the prisoner there at once, then go to the scene of the crime. If he transferred the investigation to the tribunal, clues might get stale. It seemed a fairly straightforward case, but one never knew. He sat down at the only table in the bare guard room and settled down to a study of the captain's report. It contained very little beyond what the captain had already told him. The victim's full name was Chung Fang, age 56. The girl was called Oriel, 20 years of age. And the young fisherman was 22. He took the visiting cards and the pawn ticket from his sleeve. The card stated that Mr. Chung was a native of Shanxi province. The pawn ticket was a tally, stamped with large red stamp of Chung's pawn shop. It concerned 4 brocade robes pawned the day before by a Miss Pei for 3 silver pieces, to be redeemed in 3 months, at a monthly interest of 5%. The corporal came in, followed by 2 guards carrying the stretcher.
Put it down in the corner, Judge D ordered. Do you know anything about that deaf-mute girl who lives in the watchtower? The military police gave her only her personal name, Oriel.
Yes, sir, that's what she's called. She's an abandoned child. An old crone who used to sell fruit near the gate here brought her up and taught her how to write a few dozen letters, and a bit of sign language. When the old woman died 2 years ago, the girl went to live in the tower because the street urchins were always pestering her. She raises ducks there and sells the eggs. People called her Oriel to make fun of her being dumb, and the nickname stuck.
All right. Bring the prisoner before me.
The guards came back, flanking a squat, sturdily built youngster. Oh, youngster, wow. I know that word. Nobody here, just us chickens? Just listening? Oh, hell yeah. You guys are the best. You guys let me, just indulge in all of my stupidity, and it's great. Alright. The guards came back, flanking a squat, sturdily built youngster. His tousled hair hung over the corrugated brow of his swarthy, scowling face, and his brown jacket and trousers were clumsily patched in several places. His hands were chained behind his back, an extra loop of thin chain encircling his thick, bare neck. The guards pressed him down on his knees in front of the judge. Judge D observed the youngster in silence for a while, wondering what would be the best way to start the interrogation. There was only the patter of the rain outside, and the prisoner's heavy breathing. The judge took 3 silver pieces from his sleeve.
Where did you get these?
The young fisherman muttered something in a broad dialect the judge didn't quite understand. One of the guards kicked the prisoner and growled, "Speak louder!" "It's my savings for buying a real boat."
When did you first meet Mr. Chung?
The boy burst out in a string of obscene curses. The guard on his right stopped him by hitting him over the head with the flat of his sword. Wong shook his head, then said dully, "Only knew him by sight because he was often around the quay." Suddenly he added viciously, "If I'd ever met him, I'd have killed the dirty swine, the crook."
Did Mr. Chung treat you when you pawned something there? Cheat you when you pawned something there in his shop?
Judge D asked quickly, "You think I have anything to pawn?"
Why call him a crook then?
Wong looked up at the judge and thought he caught a sly glint in the small bloodshot eyes. The youngster bent his head again and replied in a sullen voice, "Because all pawnbrokers are crooks."
What did you do last night?
I told the soldiers already. Had a bowl of noodles at the stall in the quay and then went upriver. After I'd caught some good fish, I moored the boat onto the bank north of the tower and had a nap. I planned to bring some fish to the Tower of Dawn for Oriel. Something in the way the boy pronounced the girl's name caught Judge D's attention. He said slowly,
You deny having murdered the pawnbroker, since besides you, there was only the girl about. It follows it was she who killed her.
Suddenly, Wong jumped up and went for the judge. He moved so quickly that the two guards only got a hold of him just in time. He kicked them, but got a blow on his head that made him fall down backwards, his chains clanking on the floor stones. "You dog official, you!" The youngster burst out, trying to scramble up. The corporal gave him a kick in the face that made his head slam back on the floor with a hard thud. He lay quite still, blood trickling from his torn mouth. The judge got up and bent over the still figure. He'd lost consciousness.
Don't maltreat a prisoner unless you're ordered to, the judge told the corporal sternly. Bring him round, then take him to the jail. Later I shall encourage him formally, during the noon session. I'll take the dead body to the tribunal, corporal. Report to Sergeant Hung and hand him over the statement, drawn up by the captain of the military police. Tell the sergeant that I will return to the tribunal as soon as I've questioned a few witnesses here. He cast a look at the window. It was still raining. Give me a piece of oiled cloth.
Before Judge D stepped outside, he draped the oiled cloth round his head and shoulders, and then jumped into the saddle of his hired horse. He rode along the quay and took the hardened road that led to the marshlands. The mist had cleared a little, and as he rode, he looked along curiously at the deserted, green surface of either side of the road. Narrow gullies followed a winding course through the reeds, here and there broadening into large pools that gleamed dully in the gray light. A flight of small water birds suddenly flew up, with piercing cries that resounded eerily over the desolate marsh. He noticed the water was subsiding after the torrential rain that had fallen in the night. The road was dry now, but the water had left large patches of duckweed. When he was about to pass the blockhouse, the sentry stopped him, but he let him go as soon as the judge had shown him an identification document he carried on his boot. The old watchtower was a clumsy square building of 5 stories, standing on a raised base of roughly hewn stone blocks. The shutters to the arched windows had gone, and the roof of the top story had caved in. 2 big black crows sat perched on a broken beam. As he came nearer, he heard loud quacking. A few dozen ducks were huddling close together by the side of a muddy pool below the tower's base. When the judge dismounted and fastened the reins to a moss-covered stone pillar, the ducks began to splash around in the water, quacking indignantly. The ground floor of the tower was just a dark, low vault, empty but for a heap of old broken furniture. A narrow, rickety flight of wooden stairs led up to the floor above. The judge climbed up, seeking support with his left hand from the wet, mold-covered wall, for the banisters were gone. When he stepped into a half-dark, bare room, something stirred among the rags piled on the roughly made plank bed under the arched window. Some raucous sounds came from under a soiled, patched quilt. A quick look around showed that the room only contained a rustic table with a cracked teapot and a bamboo bench against a side wall. In the corner was a brick oven carrying a large pan. Beside it stood a rattan basket filled to the brim with pieces of charcoal. The musty smell of mold and stale sweat hung in the air. Suddenly the quilt was thrown to the floor. A half-naked girl with long tousled hair jumped down from the plank bed. After one look at the judge, she again made that strange, raucous sound and scuttled to the furthest corner. Then she dropped to her knees, trembling violently. Judge D realized he didn't present a very reassuring sight. He quickly pulled his identification document from his boot, unfolded it, and walked up to the cowering girl, pointing with his forefinger at the large red stamp of the tribunal. Then he pointed at himself. She apparently understood, For now she scrambled up and stared at him with large eyes that held an animal fear. She wore nothing but a tattered skirt, fastened to her waist with a piece of straw rope. She had a shapely, well-developed body, and her skin was surprisingly white. Her round face was smeared with dirt, but not unattractive. Judge D pulled the bench up to her table and sat down. Feeling that some familiar gesture was needed to reassure the frightened girl, he took the teapot and drank from the spout, as farmers do. The girl came up to the table, spat on the dirty top, and drew in the spittle with her forefinger a few badly deformed characters. They read, "Wong did not kill him." The judge nodded. He poured the tea on the tabletop and motioned her to wipe it clean. She obediently went to bed, took a rag, and began to polish the tabletop with feverish haste. Judge D walked over to the stove and selected a few pieces of charcoal. Resuming his seat, he wrote with the charcoal on the tabletop. "Who killed him?" She shivered. She took the other piece of charcoal and wrote, "Bad black goblins." She pointed excitedly at the words, then scribbled quickly, "Bad goblins changed the good rain spirit." "You saw the black goblins?" he wrote. She shook her tousled head emphatically. She tapped with her forefinger repeatedly on the word black. Then she pointed at her closed eyes and shook her head again. The judge sighed. He wrote, "You know Mr. Chong?" She looked perplexedly at his writing, her finger in her mouth. He realized that the complicated character indicating the surname Chong was unknown to her. He crossed it out and wrote, "Old man." She again shook her head. With an expression of disgust, she drew circles around the word "old man" and added, "Too much blood. Good rain spirit won't come anymore. No silver for Wong's boat anymore." Tears came trickling down her grubby cheeks as she wrote with a shaking hand, "Good rain spirit always sleeps with me." She points at the plank bed. Judge G gave her a searching look. He knew that rain spirits played a prominent role in the local folklore, so that it was only natural they figured in the dreams and vagaries of this overdeveloped young girl. On the other hand, she'd referred to silver. He wrote, "What does the rain spirit look like?" Her round face lit up. With a broad smile, she wrote in big, clumsy letters, "Tall, handsome, kind." She drew a circle around each of the three words, and threw the charcoal on the table and, hugging her bare breasts, began to giggle ecstatically. Oh, geez, poor girl. Oh, she doesn't have all the... She's not firing on all four cylinders. The judge averted his gaze. When he turned to look at her again, she had let her hands drop and stood there staring straight ahead with wide eyes. Suddenly, her expression changed again. With a quick gesture, she pointed at the arched window and made some strange sounds. He turned round. There was a faint color in the leaden sky, the trace of a rainbow. She stared at it in childish delight, her mouth half open. The judge took up the piece of charcoal for one final question. "When does the rain spirit come?" She stared at the words for a long time, absent-mindedly combing her long, greasy locks with her fingers. At last, she bent over the table and wrote, "Black night and much rain." She put circles around the word black and rain, and added, "He came with the rain." All at once, she put her hands to her face and began to sob convulsively. The sound mingled with the loud quacking of the ducks below. Realizing that she couldn't hear the birds, He rose and laid his hand on her bare shoulder. When she looked up, he was shocked by the wild, half-crazed gleam in her wide eyes. She quickly drew a duck on the table and added the word hunger. She clasped her hand to her mouth and ran to the oven.
Yeah, Thunder Cookie. Thunder Kitty. Jesus Christ.
Oh. Judge D scrutinized the large flagstones in front of the entrance. He saw there was clean space on the dirty, dust-covered floor. Evidently, it was there the dead man had lain. The military police had swept the floor. He remembered ruefully his unkind thoughts about them. Sounds of chopping made him turn around. The girl was cutting up stale rice cakes on a primitive chopping board. The judge watched with a worried frown her deft handling of a large kitchen knife. Suddenly, she drove the long, sharp-pointed knife into the board, then shook up the chopped rice cakes into the pan on the oven, giving the judge a happy smile over her shoulder. He nodded at her and went down up the creaking stairs. The rain had ceased. A thin mist was gathering over the marsh. While untying the reins, he told the noisy ducks, "Don't worry. Your breakfast is underway." He made his horse go ahead at a sedate pace. The mist came drifting in from over the river. Strangely shaped clouds were floating over the tall reeds, here and there dissolving into long, writhing trailers that resembled the tentacles of some monstrous water animal. He wished he knew more about the hoary, deep-rooted beliefs of the local people. In many places, people still venerated a river god or goddess, and farmers and fishermen made sacrificial offerings to these at the waterside. Evidently, such things loomed large in the deaf-mute girl's feeble mind, shifting continually from fact to fiction, and unable to control the urges of her full-blown body. He drove his horse to a gallop. Back at the north gate, he told the corporal to take him into the pawnbroker's place. When they had arrived at a large, prosperous-looking pawn shop, the corporal explained that Chung's private residence was located directly behind the shop, and pointed at a narrow alleyway that led to the main entrance. Judge D told the corporal he could go back, and knocked on the black lacquered gate. A lean man, neatly dressed in a brown gown with black sash and borders, opened it. Bestowing a bewildered look on his wet, bearded visitor, he said, "You want the shop, I suppose? I can take you. I was just going there." "I am the magistrate," Judge D told him impatiently. "I've just come from the marsh. Had a good look at the place where your partner was murdered. Let's go inside. I want to hand over to you what was found on the dead body." Mr. Lin made a very low bow and conducted his distinguished visitor to a small but comfortable side hall, furnished in conventional style with a few pieces of heavy blackwood furniture. He ceremoniously led the judge to a broad bench at the back, while his host was telling the old manservant, to bring tea and cakes. The judge looked curiously at a large aviary of copper wire. Aviary of copper wire on the wall table. About a dozen paddy birds were fluttering around inside. "A hobby of my partner's," Mr. Lin said with an indulgent smile. "He was very fond of birds, always fed them himself, With his neatly trimmed chin beard and small gray mustache, Lin seemed at first just a typical middle-class shopkeeper, but a closer inspection revealed deep lines around the thin mouth and large, somber eyes suggested a man with definite personality. The judge set his cup down and formally expressed his sympathy with the firm's loss. Then he took the envelope from his sleeve and shook out the visiting cards, the small cash, the pawn ticket, and 2 keys.
That's all, Mr. Lin. Did your partner, as a rule, carry large sums of money on him?
Lin silently looked at the small pile over, stroking his chin beard. No, sir. Since he retired from the firm 2 years ago, there was no need for him to carry much money about. But he certainly had more on him than just these few coppers when he went out last night.
What time was that?
About 8, sir. After we had dinner together downstairs. He wanted to take his walk along the quay, so he said.
Did Mr. Chung often do that?
Oh, yes, sir. He'd always been a man of solitary habits. And after the demise of his wife 2 years ago, he went out for long walks nearly every other night. He was always by himself. He always had his meals served in his library upstairs, although I live here in the same house in the left wing. Last night, however, there was a matter of business to discuss, and therefore he came down to have dinner with me.
You have no family, Mr. Lin?
No, sir. Never had time to establish a household. My partner had the capital, but the actual business of the pawn shop he left largely to me. And after his retirement, he hardly set foot in our shop.
I see. To come back to last night, did Mr. Chung say when he would be back?
No, sir. The servant had standing orders not to wait up for him. My partner was an enthusiastic fisherman, you see. He thought it looked like a good fishing weather on the quay. He would hire a boat, pass the night on the river.
Judge D nodded slowly. The military police will have told you that they arrested a young fisherman called Wong Sunlong. Did your partner often hire his boat?
Oh, that I don't know, sir. There are scores of fishermen about on the quay, you see, and most of them are eager to make a few extra coppers. But if my friend rented Wong's boat, it doesn't astonish me that he ran into trouble. For Wong was a violent young ruffian. I know of him, because being a fisherman of sorts myself, I've heard others talk about him. Surely an uncompanionable youngster.
He sighed.
I'd like to go out fishing as often as my partner did, only I haven't gotten much time. Well, it's very kind of you to brought the keys, sir. Luckily that Wong didn't take them and throw them away. That larger one is the key to my late partner's library. The others are the strong box he has there for keeping important papers.
He stretched out his hand to take the keys, but Judge D scooped them and put them in his sleeve. Since I am here, he said, I'll have a look at Mr. Chung's papers right now, Mr. Lin. This is a murder case, and until it is solved, all the victim's papers are temporarily at the disposal of the authorities for possible clues. Take me to the library, please.
Oh, certainly, sir.
Lin took the judge up a broad staircase and pointed at the door at the end of the corridor. The judge unlocked it with a larger key. Thank you very much, Mr. Lin. I shall join you downstairs presently. The judge stepped into the small room, locked the door behind him, and then went to push the low, broad window wide open. The roofs of the neighboring houses gleamed in the grey mist. He turned and sat down in the capacious armchair behind the rosewood writing desks facing the window. After a casual look at the iron-bound strongbox on the floor beside his chair, he leaned back and pensively took in the stock of the surroundings. The small library was scrupulously clean and furnished with simple, old-fashioned taste. The spotless, whitewashed walls were decorated with 2 good landscape scrolls, and the solid ebony wall table bore a slender vase of white porcelain with a few wilting roses. Piles of books and brocade covers were neatly stacked on the shelves of the small bookcase of spotted bamboo. Folding his arms, the judge wondered what concentration there could be between this what connection there could be between this tastefully arranged library that seemed to belong to an elegant scholar rather than a pawnbroker, and the bare dark room and the half-ruined watchtower
breathing decay, sloth, and direst poverty. After a while, he shook his head, bent, and unlocked the strong box. Its contents matched the methodical neatness of the room. Bundles of documents, each bound with a green ribbon and provided with an inscribed label. He selected the bundles marked private correspondence and accounts and receipts. The former contained a few important letters about capital investment and correspondence from his sons, mainly about family affairs and asking Mr. Chung's advice and instructions. Leafing through the second bundle, Judge Dee's practiced eye saw at once the deceased had been leading a frugal, nearly austere life. Suddenly, he frowned. He found a pink receipt, bearing the stamp of a house of assignation, which is a brothel. It was dated back a year and a half. He quickly went through the bundle and found half a dozen similar receipts, the last dated back 6 months. Apparently, Mr. Chung had, after his wife's demise, hoped to find consolation in venal love, but had soon discovered that such hope was in vain. With a sigh, he opened the large envelope, which he had taken from the bottom of the box. It was marked, Last Will and Testament. It was dated 1 year before, and stated that all of Mr. Chung's landed property, which was considerable, was to go to his 2 sons, together with 2/3 of his capital. The last remaining 1/3 in the pawn shop was bequeathed to Mr. Lin in recognition of his long and loyal service to the firm. The judge replaced the papers. He rose and went to inspect the bookcase. He discovered that except for 2 dog-eared dictionaries, all the books were collections of poetry, complete editions of the most representative lyrical poets of the former times. He looked through 1 volume. Every difficult word had been annotated in red ink, in an unformed, rather clumsy hand. Nodding slowly, he replaced the volume. Yes, now he understood. Mr. Chung had been engaged in a trade that forbade all personal feeling, namely that of a pawnbroker, and his pronouncedly ugly face made tender attachments unlikely. Yet at heart he was a romantic, hankering after the higher things in life, but very self-conscious and shy about these yearnings. As a merchant, he had of course only received an elementary education, and so he tried laboriously to expand his literary knowledge, reading old poetry with a dictionary in this small library that he kept so carefully locked. Judge D sat down again and took his folding fan out of his sleeve. Fanning himself, he concentrated his thoughts on the unusual pawnbroker. The only glimpse of the outer world, thought of the sensitive nature of his fan, was his love of birds, evinced by the paddy birds downstairs. At last the judge got up. About to put his fan back into his sleeve, he suddenly checked himself. He looked at the fan absent-mindedly for a while, then laid it on the desk. At last, after a last look at the room, he went downstairs. His host offered him another cup of tea, but Judge D shook his head. Handing Lin the 2 keys, he said, I have to go back to the tribunal now. I found nothing among your partner's papers suggesting that he had any enemies, so I think this case is exactly what it seems. Namely, a case of murder for gain. To a poor man, 3 silver pieces is a fortune. Why are those birds fluttering about? He went to the cage. Ah, the water is dirty. You ought to tell the servant to change it, Mr. Lin. Lin muttered something and clapped his hands. Judge D groped in his sleeve. How careless of me, he exclaimed. I left my fan on the desk upstairs. Would you fetch it for me, Mr. Lin? Just as Lin was rushing to the staircase, he The old manservant came in. When the judge had told him about the water in the reservoir of the birdcage ought to be changed daily, the old man said, shaking his head, I told Mr. Lin so, but he wouldn't listen. Doesn't care for birds. My master now, he loved him. He loved them. Yes, Mr. Lin told me about that last night. He had an argument with your master about those birds. Well, yes, sir. Both of them got quite excited. What was it about, sir? Only caught a few words about birds when I brought the rice. It doesn't matter, the judge said quickly. He'd heard Mr. Lin come downstairs. Well, Mr. Lin, thanks for the tea. Come to the Chancery in, say, 1 hour, with the most important documents related to your late partner's assets. My senior clerk will help you fill out the official forms. The registration of Mr. Twins will. Mr. Lin thanked the judge profusely, and saw him respectfully to the door. Judge D told the guards at the gate of the tribunal to return his rented horse to the blacksmith, and went straight to his private residence at the back of the chancery. The old housemaster informed him that Sergeant Hume was waiting in his private office. The judge nodded. Tell the bathroom attendant that I want to take a bath now. In the black tiled dressing room adjoining the bath, he quickly stripped off his robe, drenched with sweat and rain. He felt soiled, in body and in mind. The attendant sluiced him with cold water and vigorously scrubbed his back. It was only after the judge had been lying in a sunken pool in hot water for some time that he began to feel better. Thereafter, he had an attendant massage his shoulders, and when he'd been rubbed dry, he put on a crisp, clean robe of blue cotton, and placed a cap of thin black gauze upon his head. In this attire, he walked over to his women's quarters. About to enter the garden room where his ladies usually passed the morning, he halted a moment, touched by the peaceful scene. His 2 wives, clad in flowered robes of thin silk, were sitting with Miss Tsao at the red lacquer table in front of the open sliding doors. The walled-in rock garden outside, planted with ferns and tall rustling bamboos, suggested refreshing coolness. This was his own private world, a clean haven of refuge from the outside world of cruel violence and repulsive decadence he had to deal with in official life. Then and there, he took the firm resolution that he would always preserve his harmonious family life intact. Always. His first lady put her embroidery frame down and quickly came to meet him. We've been waiting with breakfast for you for nearly an hour, she told him reproachfully. I'm sorry. The fact is, there was some trouble at the north gate, and I had to attend it at once. I must go to the Chancery now, but I shall join you for noonrise. She conducted him to the door. When she was making her bow, he told her in a low voice, And by the way, I've decided to follow your advice on the matter we discussed last night. Please make the necessary arrangements. With a pleased smile, she bowed again, and the judge went down the corridor that led to the Chancery. He found Sergeant Hume sitting in the armchair in the corner of his private office. His old advisor got up and wished him a good morning. Tapping the document in his hand, the sergeant said, I was relieved when I got this report, Your Honor, for we were getting worried about your prolonged absence. I had the prisoner locked up in jail, and the dead body deposited in the mortuary. After I had it viewed with the coroner, Ma Zhong and Chao Tai, your 2 lieutenants, rode to the north gate to see whether you needed my assistance. Judge D had sat down beside his desk. He looked askance at the pile of dossiers. Is there anything urgent among the incoming documents, Holmes? No, sir. All of these files concern routine administrative matters. Good.
and we shall devote the noon session to the murder of the pawnbroker Chung.
The sergeant nodded contentedly. I saw from the captain's report, Your Honor, that this is a fairly simple case. And since we have the murder suspect safely under lock and key.
The judge shook his head. No, I wouldn't call it a simple case exactly. But thanks to the quick measures of the military police, and thanks to the lucky chance that brought me right into the middle of things, a definite pattern has emerged.
He clapped his hands, and the headman came inside and made his bow. The judge ordered him to bring the prisoner Wang before him. He went on to the sergeant. I am perfectly aware, Wang, that a judge is supposed to interrogate an accused only publicly, in court. But this is not a formal hearing. A general talk for my orientation, rather. Sergeant Hoon looked doubtful, but the judge vouchsafed no further explanation, and began to leaf through the topmost file on his desk. He looked up when the headman brought Wang inside. The chains had been taken off him, but his swarthy face looked as surly as before. The headman pressed him down on his knees and stood himself behind him, his heavy whip in his hands.
Your presence is not required, headman,
Judge D told him curtly. The headman cast a worried glance at Sergeant Holmes.
This is a violent ruffian, Your Honor,
he began diffidently.
You heard me,
the judge snapped. After the disconcerted headman had left, Judge D leaned back in his chair. He asked the young fisherman in a conversational tone,
How long have you been living on the waterfront, Wang?
Ever since I can remember, the boy muttered. It's a strange land, the judge said slowly to Sergeant Holmes.
When I was riding through the marsh this morning,
I saw weirdly shaped clouds drifting about,
and shreds of mist that looked like the long arms reaching out of the water,
as if the youngster had been listening intently. Now he interrupted quickly. Better not speak of those things.
Yes, you know all about those things, Wang. On stormy nights, there must be more going on in the marshlands than we city dwellers realize.
Wang nodded vigorously. I've seen many things, he said in a low voice. My own eyes. They all come up from the water. Some can harm you. Others help drowning people, sometimes. But it's better to keep away from them anyway.
Exactly. Yet you made bold to interfere, Wang. And see what has happened to you now. You were arrested, you were kicked and beaten, and now you're a prisoner accused of murder.
I told you I didn't kill him.
Yes. But did you know who or what killed him? If you stabbed him when he was dead. Several times.
I saw red,
Wang muttered.
If I'd known sooner, I'd have cut his throat. If I'd just known by sight, the rat,
Hold your tongue, Judge D interrupted him sharply. You cut up a dead man. That's a mean and cowardly thing to do.
He continued calmly.
However, since even in your blind rage you spared Oriole by refraining from an explanation, I'm willing to forget what you did. How long have you been going with her?
Over a year. She's sweet, and she's clever, too. Don't believe she's a half-wit. She can write more than 100 characters. I can read only a dozen or so.
Judge D took 3 silver pieces from his sleeve and laid them on the desk. Take this silver. It belongs rightly to her and to you. Buy your boat and marry her.
What the heck? Oh. I didn't know it looped.
And scene. Take the silver. It belongs rightly to you and her. Buy your boat and marry her. She needs you, Wong.
The youngster snatched the silver and tucked it in his belt. The judge went on.
You'll have to go to jail for a few hours again, for I can't release you until you've been formally cleared of the murder charge. Then you'll be set free. Learn to control your temper, Wong.
He clapped his hands. The headman came in at once. He'd been waiting just outside the door, ready to rush inside at the first sign of trouble.
Take this prisoner back to his cell, headman. Then fetch Mr. Lin. You'll find him in the chancery.
Sergeant Wu had been listening with mounting astonishment. And he asked with a perplexed look, "What were you talking about with that young fellow, Your Honor? I couldn't follow it all. Are you really intending to let him go?" Judge D rose and went to the window. Looking at the dreary, wet courtyard, he said,
"It's raining again." "What was I talking about, Win? I was just checking whether Wong really believed all those weird superstitions. One of these days, Win, you might try to find in our Chancery Library a book on local folklore."
But you don't believe all of that. But you don't believe all that nonsense, sir."
"No, I don't. Not all of it, at least. But I feel I ought to read up on the subject, for it plays a large role in the daily life of the common people of our district. Pour me a cup of tea, will you?"
While the sergeant prepared the tea, Judge D resumed his seat and concentrated on the official documents on his desk. After he drank the second cup, there was a knock on the door. The headman ushered Mr. Lin inside, then discreetly withdrew.
"Sit down, Mr. Lin."
The judge addressed his guest affably.
"I trust my senior clerk gave you the necessary instructions for the documents to be drawn up."
"Yes, indeed, Your Honor." "Oh, yes, indeed, Your Honor. Right now we were checking the landed property with the register, and..."
"According to the will drawn up a year ago," the judge cut in, "Mr. Chung bequeathed all the land to his two sons, together with 2/3 of his capital, as you know. 1/3 of the capital and the pawn shop he left to you. Are you planning to continue the business?"
"No, sir,"
Lin replied with a thin smile.
"I've worked in that pawn shop for more than 30 years. From morning till night. I'll sell it. I'll live off the rent from my capital."
"Precisely. But suppose Mr. Chung had made a new will, containing a new clause stipulating that you were only to get the shop."
As Lin's face went livid, he went on quickly.
"It's a prosperous business, and it would take you 4 to 5 years to assemble enough capital to retire. And you're getting on in years, Mr. Lin."
"Impossible. How could he..."
Lin stammered.
Then he snapped, "Did you find a new will in his strong box?"
Instead of answering the question, Judge D said coldly, "Your partner had a mistress, Mr. Lin. Her love came to mean more to him than anything else."
Lin jumped up. "Do you mean to say that old fool willed his money to that deaf-mute slut?"
"Yes, you know all about that affair, Mr. Lin. Since last night, when your partner told you. It was a violent quarrel. No, don't try to deny it. Your manservant overheard what you said, and he will testify in court." Lin sat down. He wiped his moist face. Then he began calmly.
"Yes, sir, I admit I got very angry when my partner informed me last night that he loved that girl. He wanted to take her away to some distant place and marry her. I tried to make him see how utterly foolish that would be, but he told me to mind my own business and ran out of the house in a huff. I had no idea he would go to the tower. It's common knowledge that the young hoodlum Wong is carrying on with his half-wit. on surprise, too, and he murders my partner. Apologize for not having mentioned these facts before to you this morning, sir. I couldn't bring myself to compromise my late partner. And since you'd arrested the murderer, everything would have come out anyway in court. He shook his head. I'm partly to blame, sir. I should have gone after him that night. I should have.
But you did go after him, Mr. Lynn.
Judge D interrupted curtly.
You're a fisherman, too. You know the marsh as well as her partner.
Ordinarily, one can't cross the marsh, but after the heavy rain, the water rises, and an experienced boatman in a shallow skiff could paddle across by way of the swollen gullies and pools. Impossible. The road is patrolled by the military police on a map.
A man crouching in a skiff could take cover behind the tall reeds, Mr. Lynn.
Therefore, your partner could only visit the tower on nights after a heavy rain. And therefore, the poor half-witted girl took the visitor for a supernatural being, the rain spirit, for he came with the rain. He sighed. Suddenly, he fixed Lynn with his piercing eyes and said sternly,
When Mr. Tolman told you about these plans last night, Lynn, you saw all of your long-cherished hopes of life and ease and luxury go up into thin air. Therefore, you followed Chum, and you murdered him in the tower by thrusting a knife into his back.
Lynn raised his hands. What a fantastic theory, sir. How do you propose to prove this slanderous accusation?
By Mrs. Pay's pawn ticket, among other things. It was found by the military police on the scene of the crime.
Mr. Chum had completely retired from the business,
as you told me yourself. Why, then, would he be carrying a pawn ticket that had been issued that very day?
As Lynn remained silent, Judge D went on.
You decided on the spur of the moment to murder Chum, and you rushed after him. It was the hour after the evening rise, so the shopkeepers in your neighborhood were on the lookout for their evening custom when you passed. Also on the quay, where you took off in your small skiff, there was an unusual number of people about, because it looked like heavy rain was on its way. The glint of sudden panic in Lynn's eyes was the last confirmation the judge had been waiting for. He concluded in an even voice. If you confess now, Mr. Lynn, sparing me the trouble of sifting out all the evidence of the eyewitnesses, I am prepared to add a plea for clemency to your death sentence, on the grounds that it was an unpremeditated murder. Lynn stared ahead with a vacant look. All at once, his pale face became distorted by a spasm of rage.
The despicable old Fletcher, he spat, made me sweat and slave all those years. And now he was going to throw all that good money away on a cheap half-witted... No, I'm not going to say that word. The money I made for him.
He looked steadily at the judge and added in a firm voice,
Yes, I killed him. He deserved it.
Oh, I see text. Now we know it runs for 2 hours, right? Is a high school team looking to score during prom? What isn't he looking to score?
Judge D gave the sergeant the sign. While Holm went to the door, the judge told the pawnbroker, I shall hear your full confession during the noon session. They waited in silence till the sergeant came back with the headman and 2 constables. They put Lynn in chains and led him away. A sordid case, sir, Sergeant Holm remarked dejectedly. The judge took a sip from his teacup and held it up to be refilled. Pathetic, rather. I would even call Lynn pathetic, Holm, were it not for the fact that he made a determined effort to incriminate Long.
What How's Wong's role in all this, sir? You didn't even ask him what he did this morning.
There was no need to. For what happened is as plain as pikestaff. Oriole had told Wong that a rain spirit visited her at night and sometimes gave her money. Wong considered it a great honor that she had relations with a rain spirit. Remember that only half a century ago, in many of the river districts in our empire, the people immolated every year a young boy or girl as a human sacrifice to the local river god, until authorities stepped in. When Wong came to the tower this morning to bring Oriole her fish, he found in the room a dead man, lying on his face on the floor. The crying Oriole gave him to understand that the goblins had killed the rain spirit and changed him into an ugly old man. When Wong turned over the corpse and recognized the old man, he suddenly understood that he and Oriole had been deceived, and in a blind rage pulled his knife and stabbed the dead man. Then he realized that this was a murder case and would be suspected, so he fled. The military police caught him while trying to wash his trousers, which had become stained with Chung's blood. Sergeant Hong nodded. How did you discover all of this in only a few hours, sir? At first, I thought the captain's theory hit the nail on the head. The only point which worried me a bit was the long interval between the murder and the stabbing of the victim's breast. I didn't worry a bit about the pawn ticket, for it's perfectly normal for a pawnbroker to carry a ticket about that he is made out that very same day. Then, when questioning Wong, it struck me that he called Chung crook. That was a slip of the tongue, for Wong was determined to keep both Oriole and himself out of this, so as not to have divulged that they had let themselves be fooled. While I was interviewing Oriole, she stated that the goblins had killed and changed her rain spirit. I didn't understand that at all. It was during my visit to Lin that at last I got on the right track. Lin was nervous and therefore garrulous, and told me at length about his partner taking no part at all in the business. I remembered the pawn ticket found on the murder scene and began to suspect Lin. But it was only after I had inspected the dead man's library and got a clear impression of his personality that I found the solution. I checked my theory by eliciting from the manservant the fact that Lin and Chung had quarreled about Oriole the night before. The name Oriole meant, of course, nothing to the servant, but he told me they had a heated argument about birds. The rest was routine. The judge put his cup down. I have learned from this case how important it is to study carefully our ancient handbooks of detection. There it is stated again and again that the first step of a murder investigation is to ascertain the character, daily life, and habits of the victim. And in this case, it was indeed the murder's man's personality that supplied the key. Sergeant Holmes stroked his grey mustache with a pleased smile. That girl and the young man were very lucky indeed, having you as the investigating magistrate, sir. For all the evidence pointed straight at Wong, and he would have been convicted and beheaded. If the girl is a deaf mute, and Wong isn't much of a talker either. Judge D nodded. Leaning back in his chair, he said with a faint smile, That brings me to the main benefit I derived from this case, Wong. A very personal and very important benefit. I must confess to you that early this morning I was feeling a bit low, and for a moment actually doubted whether this was, after all, the right career for me. I was a fool. This is a great, magnificent office, Wong. If only because it enables us to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves.
This feels like a trap, but I'm also a little nervous for the answer.
But yeah, I think that is about all my voice can take. If y'all want, we can continue the pranks into the first week of April. In case anyone had any pranks they wanted to share but did not get to. There will be time for it. Trust me. This car is kind of annoying. But yeah. I've been at this for 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'd say this is a good place as any to call it. But thank y'all for letting me indulge my weirdness.
But alas,
It's been a productive evening. It really has. I actually got done everything I wanted to get done today. Which when I woke up this morning, I did not think I would be able to do. Oh, I'm gonna sound like a frog tomorrow. That's okay, though. In the meantime, though, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions. Do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. And I will see y'all. You wonderful people. At a later time. Take care, guys. You pine huggo. You pine huggo to all.